Well, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so incredibly delighted to be here. And of course, Reverend Temple Hayes, I adore you. I love you. I appreciate that as you're talking about me being a we person, you're also talking about yourself and your incredible community. So I am deeply, deeply honored to be here right now with you. And I want to start by sharing with you that some years ago, when I had the calling to go into ministry, about 15 years ago, and started taking classes at Unity Village, and ultimately went through the spiritual development program, the spiritual leadership program, one of the things I said to myself is, I'm not going to be one of those people that creates like the 4 steps to ultimate success or the 10 steps to personal freedom. So here I am with you today, 15 years later, sharing with you my 5 steps to embracing the life of your dreams. One of the things I know to be true is I'm not going to say never because we don't actually know what is coming, but what we do know is the ultimate truth of who and what we are. And so the reason I've created this 5-step process is sometimes our minds like something to hold on to understand this evolutionary process, this infinite beingness that we are. So I want to share with you to begin that I remember being a young person, pre 5 years old, filled with joy, filled with awe, filled with wonder. I remember those long summer days laying in the backyard, mesmerized by life, looking at a blade of grass and just looking at the intricacy of it, and watching ants and seeing butterflies and the smell of flowers. What I am speaking to is I remember knowing the deepest truth that I was a spiritual being. Now, those obviously weren't the words I had in my mind when I was 4, 5, 6 years old laying in the backyard. But the reason I want to start with that is I did come into this world as an infinite spiritual being. And in my experience, we all come into this world as infinite spiritual beings. And then we come into a world that starts to teach us about fear, separation, lack, not enoughness. We receive messages from our family systems, from our spiritual communities, from our schools that teach us something other than the truth. So we ultimately begin to believe the illusion of separateness, the illusion of not enoughness. So I start with that story to share with you that I recognize now that the spiritual journey is really a journey of returning to the ultimate truth of who and what we are. It's not a destination, it's a great remembering of that truth. So at age 7, I had a profound experience of closing my heart. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember sitting at the dining room table and a physical sensation closing down my heart. It was as if a wall was built around that heart. This is important because at that moment, I decided that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something broken about me. The world wasn't safe. I was not enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good enough. I remember when my nephew was 7 years old, and I remember looking at him and imagining myself at that age making these huge decisions about the world. And it breaks my heart to imagine a little precious being, a beautiful 7-year-old, making these massive life decisions that ultimately created a life based on lies. So I walked into a Unity in 1988. I was 23 years old. I still felt broken. I still felt damaged. I still believed there was something wrong with me. My teenage years had been riddled with addiction and ultimately brought me to a place of surrender where I realized that I could no longer continue my life the way it was going. I got clean and sober at the age of 20, kind of ironically, just a few days before my 21st birthday. And that began my journey, a journey toward returning to my own wholeness. So when I walked into that Unity, I remember hearing a message that was so profound. It resonated with the core of my being. But it was much more than a teaching. What I remember about walking into that small Unity in Dallas, 1988, was the energy that I felt. There was a frequency, a vibration, there was a vitality there that I hadn't experienced possibly in my entire life. It was as if I was coming home. I start with this because I want to share with you my own journey in New Thought and what happened for me, of course, for me, that allowed me to have this incredible journey that brought me to a place of creating this 5 steps to embracing the life of your dreams process. You see, what I heard was your thoughts create your reality. Thoughts held in mind create after their kind. And there was a huge movement in the late 80s, the power of positive thinking. It was before we, I think, used the term the law of attraction. So it was the power of positive thinking. So I thought, okay, this is going to be really easy. I'm going to change my thinking and change my life. That was the message, and it was incredibly powerful. Here was the issue for me. I did work on changing my thinking, but I hadn't done some of the deeper work of making peace with my past and looking at all the different ways I separated from my essential truth. I start with that to share with you that in my own journey of ministry for the past 15 years, and working as a counselor, a spiritual counselor for over 20 years, many people come to me and say, I want to create the life of my dreams, and I understand now that the power is within me. I recognize now that the power in the world is not as great as the power within me, and I want to learn how to consciously create my life. The key is really important here, though. What I usually see people doing is starting to try to change their thinking or set intentions. Maybe we call them resolutions. We get really clear. Maybe we make a vision board. And we go about trying to consciously create our life. So that brings me to this 5-step process. My mind loves simple. I really love simple concepts because what I have come to understand is there's so much power in simplicity. So I've given these 5 steps to conscious creation an acronym, and the acronym is MOVIE, creating a new movie for your life. M, step 1, making peace with the past. O, overcoming core false beliefs. V, visioning. I, intention setting. And E, embodying the vision. Let's take a deeper dive into these 5 steps. So as I said, most people, myself included, for at least the first decade I was in New Thought, I thought I just needed to create intentions and focus on those intentions, focus on positive thinking, focus on recognizing that I'm creating my life based on my thinking. But in my experience, we first must clear away what is preventing us from recognizing the ultimate truth of who and what we are. So I start this process with making peace with the past. Because quite simply, if I haven't resolved my past, I'm carrying it with me. And as Reverend Temple so beautifully said at the beginning, if you're over 30, it's time to no longer blame your parents. And Temple, I'm going to confess to you, I still blamed my parents in my 30s. I was still blaming my parents. Now, it wasn't conscious. I would have probably told you that, I don't blame my parents. But what was happening for me was that I had some unconscious beliefs and biases about myself and the world that were creating what I called reality. So those of us who have been in New Thought for any amount of time recognize that we create our own reality. And I love the way Byron Katie frames it. She says, most people have been looking to the world to change so that we can be happy. Looking to the world to change so that we can be happy. The issue is it's never worked. because we are literally projecting onto a blank screen, thus the movie metaphor again. So we are the projector, and if there's a piece of lint on the lens of our projector, we will see it everywhere, and we will call it reality. Now, understanding that intellectually is an important first step. But why I start with making peace with the past is if we don't go back and clear away or move beyond what has happened in our past, we are literally projecting it onto what we call reality. And we recognize, of course, in New Thought, that we are creating that reality based on what we've often been told we are creating it based on our thinking. Yes, and we are really creating it based on the core frequency that we are holding and that we are radiating into the world. So let me explain how it worked in my life. I came into New Thought. I believed I was unlovable. I believed I was broken in some way. And I really did learn how to change my thinking. I learned how to recognize my thoughts. And as Temple said so beautifully earlier, the law is always working. And I had a great teacher say to me, if you don't believe the law is working, look at your life and look at the connection to what you're thinking about yourself. So I spent the first decade in New Thought using affirmations, trying to change my thinking. But I hadn't yet really understood, at least at a very deep level, that it was really the vibration or the frequency that I was holding about myself in the world that was creating what I called reality. And so you might call it forgiveness. I call it making peace with the past, and I'll tell you why. Forgiveness can be, or quite often is framed in duality. This person has harmed me, but I'm going to be a bigger person and rise above that. Or I have harmed these people, but I'm going to learn how to rise above that. When I shifted that to making peace with the past, I began to recognize that no matter what has happened, I can shift my consciousness. I can look at what those core beliefs and ideas I have about myself and the core frequency I am holding that is creating what I call reality. In other words, we are not the sum total of our past. We are the core vibration that we are holding. And what we know in New Thought is that underneath any core belief that we're holding is the original frequency, love, source, light, essence. That's the truth of who and what we are. But we have put all these barriers, as Rumi says, our job is not to seek seek love, but to seek all the barriers we put on top of it. That was a paraphrase, by the way. So, making peace with the past is the important first step, because if I don't make peace with everything that's happened in my life, I'm going to be bringing it with me. And so if I'm struggling with that, can I look at that without judgment? Krishnamurti says the highest form of human intelligence is to see ourselves without judgment. So can I take a look? Can I look at my past and what that has created? Maybe we call it a traumatic experience. It has happened, but it is not who and what I am. Can I allow myself to really move into and really examine from this place of openness and curiosity, what are those core beliefs? What is that core vibration? Is it possible for me to make peace with that right here and right now? And then we move into the second step of the process, which is overcoming core false beliefs. Now, I used to say letting go of core false beliefs. First of all, it didn't make sense because it's not really a great acronym, MLVIE, but it's much more than that, because I had spent that first decade thinking, I need to let go of these beliefs. I need to let go of this negative thinking, or what I called negative thinking. And so I was having this relationship with myself, quite frankly, that was a bit brutal. I would recognize or hear myself, because see, I was totally unaware that I had this inner narrative. But once I became aware of it, I kind of went to battle with it, to be honest. And we hear this a lot in our world, fight, overcome. We even sometimes and quite often send someone into the next dimension of life saying things like she lost her battle with cancer. So we are deeply entrenched in a paradigm of fight. But what gets created when we resist and when we fight, we know that it creates more of that which we're trying to overcome. So in my own journey, yes, I recognized I had this thinking, and I recognized that it was creating my life. I recognized that the core false beliefs were much more than a thought, but a frequency. But I was going to battle with them. And so I would sit down in meditation, and I believed it was to quiet the mind. And my mind was very, very active with all the reasons that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy. And as I say that now, it's heartbreaking to me because I look at myself, I look back at myself, my 20-something-year-old self, and what I was longing for was love and connection. But because I had separated from my true nature back at 7 years old, and because I had created these core false beliefs about myself and the world, I could no longer access that deep truth. And in reality, I didn't realize I could access my true nature. So overcoming core false beliefs to me is a much better way of saying it than letting go of core false beliefs. In other words, I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. I have my past, but I'm not my past. So I start with making peace with the past and overcoming core false beliefs because in my experience, we can use it as let's use a painting as a metaphor. If I'm painting on a blank canvas, I can paint whatever portrait I want to create, right? But if I'm trying to paint over my past or paint over my core false beliefs or paint over the frequency that I'm holding, eventually that paint might seep through, right? So we can use affirmations, we can use our vision boards, but ultimately what creates reality is that core vibration, which brings us to visioning. I want to say a little bit about the difference between visualization and visioning. So for me, when I came into Unity and into New Thought, I used the power of visualization. And as I said, I was really getting some mixed results. So I was trying to change my thinking, and then something would manifest, and then it wouldn't. And then I would say, why doesn't this work for me? And so if you're watching right now and this is your experience, why doesn't this law of attraction thing work for me? Why can't I? What is happening in my consciousness? All those things I was doing to myself. And I had a profound shift at one point where I recognized the difference between visualization and visioning. So I want to give a shout out to Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith. If you want to know more about visioning, check out his book, Life Visioning. Visioning, very simply said, is tapping into that deep wellspring of wisdom and being open to receiving a message from this deep inner knowing. Visualization, or the law of attraction, is often said to be holding a thought in mind and then we create based on that thought or even that frequency. But what I discovered as I moved more deeply into this process is, yes, I did learn how to manifest. And I started manifesting everything on the vision board. But here's what happened for me. I got the house, I got the partner, I got the car, and it didn't change the experience that I was having. You see, I had been in the midst of a destination addiction and didn't even know it. Once I get this house, I will be happy. Once I get the perfect partner, I will be happy. Once I get that perfect car, I will be happy. And what happened for me is I did manifest it all. And I remember sitting on my deck with the fabulous view, which I thought was going to make me happy. And I thought, why didn't this change anything? And so as I moved more deeply into making peace with the past and overcoming core false beliefs, I recognized that I had been creating my intentions or my goals from my mind. And because I hadn't cleared a lot from the past, I was wanting to create a life based on my past instead of trusting spirit. That internal guidance system, that internal GPS. So visioning isn't about holding a picture. It's about releasing to the best of our ability a picture and allowing ourselves to listen very deeply to the what we once called the still small voice, but it does not need to be still, nor does it need to be small. Because once I understood, and I don't mean understood, but I really understood at a deep level, that visioning would create a life that was beyond my wildest imagination, that's much bigger than anything my mind could create. And here's a very important point. When I trust vision, when I listen very deeply to that internal knowing, that infinite spiritual self, not only do I create the life of my dreams, but I become a profoundly beneficial presence on the planet. That as I step into a larger vision for my life, more people are served. The more of us that are trusting vision and knowing that we're infinite beings, it's not only a ripple effect in the world, but it's an instant shift in consciousness. As our friend Marianne Williamson says, as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give permission for others to do the same. So after we've spent dedicated time listening to that inner wisdom, we can sit with that for a while. You see, I used to catch visions for my life, and then I learned that I could trust those visions, but my mind wanted to immediately go into action. And so what I have come to understand experientially is that when I receive these visions for my life, I get to sit with them for a while, allowing those to emerge in a really powerful way. Then I move into the practicality of intention setting, a process that has changed my life. For the last 12 years, I've been doing an intention process where I create intentions for my life based on that deep vision and then give it a practical application in the world. We have often been told that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And what I want to say is that we're actually spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. Or as Michael Beckwith says, we are spiritual beings having a human incarnation. This is important because it takes us into the final step in the 5-step process, embodying the vision. And so when we hear embodying the vision, we might naturally go to a place of tune into the frequency of that which we want to manifest. Yes, and. What I want to share with you about embodying the vision is not only imagining and feeling into what it would be like, what it would feel like, what the frequency would be once this is manifested. There's something deeper here. And that is embodying our original perfection. And what happens at this point is we shift from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. We are here to not only tap into and tune into the frequency of that which we want to manifest, but to tune into, tap into, and then radiate our original frequency, which is love or source or light or God essence, whatever word we use, our Buddha nature, our essential beingness. And when we arrive at that place, when we have made peace with our past, when we have overcome core false beliefs, when we have dedicated ourselves to spending time in the silence and listening very, very carefully with openness and presence to inner vision, when we give it some practicality to bring it into manifestation and here onto planet Earth, then we arrive at the place where we recognize we're here to actually vibrate or radiate the frequency of love. And the greatest paradox for me is when I am here to practice the law of radiance rather than the law of attraction, then suddenly everything that I thought was going to make me happy started to manifest. But the key here was I actually recognized that I am a whole and perfect spiritual being. Each of us is a whole and perfect spiritual being with infinite potential. And when I understood that, suddenly the world started to reflect that. So what I want to say in closing is thank you. Thank you for exploring with me the infinite possibilities for your life And what I want to also say is that each of us right now is called to radiate this love frequency into the world. And I know that if you're watching right now, you're already doing that. You're already being that. Community comes together to support the greater possibility of how we can be a beneficial presence on the planet by simply radiating that love energy, by knowing very deeply a greater reality than what we see in the world, what we see in politics or religion, or what we see on the news, or what we see on social media. There is a greater reality here, and that reality is that in the midst of absolutely anything happening, love is who you are. Source is who you are. You do have the ability, each of us has the ability to consciously create the life of our dreams and be a beneficial presence on the planet. Deep, deep, deep gratitude to each of you. I'm so grateful and so honored to have shared with you today. And of course, Reverend Temple, I'm so grateful for our connection. Lots of love. Go out in the world, everyone. Be love, be light, be the frequency of this infinite beingness. Life is a great experiment. And so each of us can go out in the world and radiate this love and light into the world and simply notice what happens, consciously creating a world that is deeply entrenched, the deep knowing that love is the most powerful frequency in the universe, and that is the core frequency of each and every one of us. Peace and blessings.